Okay, let's dive in. So picture this. You're planning that amazing trip to Maui, dreaming about the beaches, maybe driving the Hana Highway,
Mm,
and then bam, you check the car rental prices.
yeah.
And the cost for a minivan for the wiki, it's nearly doubled just in the last 7 days.
That particular detail, that minivan price jump, it's really eye-catching, isn't it?
Totally.
It tells you straight away that something significant is happening in the Maui rental market right now.
It absolutely does. And that, along with other trends, is exactly what we're digging into today. We've got this great source material here tracking weekly price shifts, historical data too, all for Maui rentals.
Right.
So our mission here is to unpack these latest numbers, try to understand what's driving the current situation, especially that huge minivan increase. See how Maui stacks up against the other islands.
And the big one.
And the big one, yeah. Help you figure out if booking your car now is the smart move, or if maybe, just maybe, waiting could save you some money, especially if you're looking at traveling around the 4th of July.
Yeah, that holiday timing is key. And just to set the scene, this data we're looking at is current as of June 1st, looking at prices for rental starting like right now, June 2nd.
Perfect. It really feels like that tipping point, doesn't it? Moving out of that slower shoulder season and into, well, summer travel mode.
Definitely.
So let's get right into that current snapshot for this week starting June 2nd, 2025. What's the general vibe from the numbers?
Well, for most types of cars, the trend is prices are firming up a bit, which makes sense, right? It's pretty much what you'd expect moving towards summer rate.
And we are seeing some, moderate increases compared to just the week before.
Yes, exactly. Things like economy cars, they're up maybe 20% at OGG Airport with one company. Midsize up around 13%. Jeeps and SUVs both showing about a 10% increase.
Okay, so noticeable jumps week on week, but kind of in line with that seasonal shift you mentioned.
Right. It's the usual seasonal tightening, more or less.
But then, like you pointed out with the minivans, you hit these outliers where it's not just firming up, it's, well, exploding.
That's where minivans just dominate the conversation this week. You mentioned nearly 90% jump in just 1 week.
Yeah.
And that pushes them to, around $750 a week at the airport, OGG, and still over $700 even off airport. That's not just summer pricing anymore. That's really pushing into peak season territory.
And looking back a bit further, the source notes it's even more dramatic for minivans, right?
Oh, yeah. The data shows they've actually tripled in price over just the last 4 weeks. Think about that. From under $250 a week to that $750 mark now.
Wow, that is intense, a really sudden climb.
It really shows how fast things can change when demand spikes or maybe supply gets tight for certain popular vehicles. Convertibles are another interesting one.
What's happening there?
Well, they were actually down just a bit this week, maybe 3%, sitting around $650 a week. But if you look back over the last 5 weeks,
Let me guess, up.
way up, more than doubled. They went from about $260 a week 5 weeks ago to where they are now, over $600.
So, okay, what's the thinking behind these really big jumps for specific cars like minivans and convertibles, especially compared to the more modest rises for others?
The source points to a few potential factors. The overall seasonal shift is definitely a part of it, moving into summer.
Sure.
But for these really popular vacation type vehicles, the minivans for families, the convertibles for that Maui vibe, it could just be lower inventory right now, fewer cars available.
Okay.
Plus, you've got the regular seasonal thing where rental companies might move some older cars off island or just, take them out of the active fleet while they prep for the summer rush. That reduces supply too.
And for Jeeps specifically, anything different?
Yeah, the analysis mentioned something about delayed deliveries of new Jeeps finally arriving and getting added into the fleets now. That could be messing with their price dynamics a bit too.
Got it. So a mix of seasonal trends, inventory management, maybe even supply chain stuff for specific models. Okay, that helps understand the why. Now let's talk about where you rent, airport versus off-airport. What's the deal looking like right now?
So historically, the rule of thumb has always been that off-airport places are usually cheaper.
Right, because of the lower taxes and fees typically.
Exactly. Those mandatory airport fees add up. But the source did note that pattern got a bit disrupted over the past winter and spring.
Oh, how so?
Well, sometimes the off-airport spots actually ended up being more expensive, probably due to, local demand surges or maybe tighter supply at the specific non-airport locations during certain weeks.
Interesting. So for this week, June 2nd onwards, are we back to normal? Is off-airport cheaper again?
For most types of cars, yes. It looks like the normal pattern is back. Economy, midsize, SUVs, and even those pricey minivans, they're all showing lower prices if you book off airport this week.
Okay, most categories. Is there an exception?
Yep, Jeeps again. Jeeps are the outlier this week. The data actually shows they're currently cheaper if you rent them at the airport at OGG.
Huh. And maybe that ties back to what you said about new Jeep inventory possibly arriving at the main airport hubs first.
Could be. It makes logical sense, yeah.
So the takeaway for this week is check off airport first for potential savings on most cars. But if you're set on a Jeep, the airport might surprisingly be the better bet right now, like that cheapest economy car example.
Right. It was about $210 a week off airport versus $236 at OGG. So little saving there.
Okay. Let's widen the lens now. How does Maui look compared to the other big Hawaiian islands right now, price-wise?
Yeah, looking at the cheapest one-week rental starting June 2nd across the 5 main airports, it's quite a range this week.
Lay the numbers on us.
Okay. Honolulu, HNL on Oahu, brace yourself, $743 a week. That's up nearly 200% just from last week.
Whoa, $743.
Yeah. Then Maui OGG is $241. That's up 26%. Kauai, LIH is $350, actually down 5%. Kona, KOA on the Big Island is $248, up 7%. And Hilo, ITO, also Big Island, $259, up 12%.
Okay, wow. That Honolulu price is just way out there, almost triple the price of Maui or Kona. What's going on there?
It really stands out, doesn't it? The source mentioned that sometimes you see spikes like this linked to big local events, maybe a huge convention or something, but
Nothing obvious this time.
apparently not. The analysis didn't point to a clear reason for that massive Oahu surge this specific week. It's just a really high number right now.
And amidst all that, where does Maui sit?
Well, even with its own prices going up, Maui's Kahului Airport, OGG, is actually still the cheapest of those 5 major airports, has been for 10 weeks running now, according to the source.
10th week in a row. Okay.
Though, this week Kona is really close behind, only about $7 more expensive.
Right. So Maui is holding its ground as relatively affordable compared to its neighbors, especially Oahu right now. Which brings us nicely to that big timing question, looking ahead to summer and especially July 4th. What's the forecast saying? What are those advanced booking systems telling us?
The message from the advanced booking data seems pretty clear, unfortunately. Prices are trending up over the next few weeks.
Okay.
And there's a pretty significant spike projected right around the July 4th holiday itself.
Can we quantify that? Like, if you were booking today for a rental starting, say, July 6th, right after the holiday, what kind of prices are showing up?
So, based on the advance rates being tracked, a week-long rental starting July 6th at OGG Airport is currently showing up at around $450 a week.
Okay, compare that to starting this week.
This week was around $240, remember? So $450 versus $240, that's a 91% increase, basically almost double the price just a month later.
Wow.
And off airport for that same July week, it's forecast around $315. Still about 50% more than starting this week off airport.
That's a serious holiday premium baked into the advance prices.
It really is. And it sounds very familiar. The analysis pointed out that last year, 2024, showed a really similar pattern.
How so?
Prices were sort of flat through May and early June, much like we're seeing this year, and then boom, a sharp spike specifically for that 4th of July period.
So history seems to be repeating itself, or at least the booking systems expect it to.
Looks that way.
Which really sets up the classic dilemma, doesn't it? You see this big spike predicted. Do you lock in a price now, even if it feels high? Or do you, roll the dice and hope prices might actually drop if you wait until closer to your trip?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially for peak travel times. And the source material digs into 4 different indicators, kind of like clues, to try and help figure this out for the July 4th window. And honestly, the signals are, well, they're a bit mixed.
Okay, mixed signals. Let's break down these clues. What's the first one telling us?
All right, clue number 1 looks at historical last-minute prices. This is based on a study covering 2013 to 2018. And historically, yes, prices did go up from early June to early July back then.
Okay.
But crucially, that study suggests the typical last-minute increase was only around 40% from the lowest point in early June.
Only 40% historically. But the current advanced booking systems are showing almost double, like 90%.
Exactly. That's the key comparison. The historical last-minute rise was much less dramatic than what the current advanced systems are predicting for this July 4th. So this clue might hint that today's advanced pricing systems could be overestimating how much prices will actually jump at the last minute. Maybe.
Interesting. Okay, so history suggests the last-minute reality might not be quite as bad as the current forecast implies, What's clue number 2?
Clue number 2 comes from that same historical study, 2013-2018. It compares last-minute prices directly against prices booked further in advance for this specific time of year, early June to early July.
And what did that show?
The long-term average was pretty clear. Booking closer to your travel date consistently resulted in lower prices than booking way ahead for this period.
Lower.
Yeah. The source actually states that historically, booking last minute saves money almost 90% of the time across the year. The big exceptions are really just the absolute peak winter holiday weeks like Christmas and New Year's.
So for the early July timeframe, history strongly suggests waiting usually paid off.
Based on that multi-year average, yes. Now, clue number 3 shifts focus to more recent data. How have things looked since, say, December 2024?
Okay, what's the recent trend been? Still favoring waiting.
Well, since about mid-February of this year, prices booked closer to the rental date have generally stayed below the prices booked much further out, so similar pattern to the long-term history in that sense.
I sense a but coming.
But yeah, the gap between the closer in price and the far out price, it's been pretty variable. And the source notes that during the more recent heavy travel holidays, that gap, meaning the potential savings from waiting, was actually quite small. Sometimes barely any saving at all.
Ah, okay. So recently, especially around holidays, waiting might still save you a bit, but perhaps not that much. Less benefit than historically.
That seems to be the implication from this recent data. And this clue leads the analysis to suggest something interesting for navigating this July 4th spike. That maybe locking in the current advance price, even if it seems high, might be a reasonable hedge. Because while a slightly lower price could pop up last minute, the potential savings might be pretty small based on recent holiday trends.
Right.
And you're carrying the risk that something unexpected happens and last-minute prices actually surge even higher. So it's kind of weighing that potentially small saving against the security of having a car locked in.
Makes sense. It's like pay a bit more now for peace of mind versus gamble for potentially small savings, but risk a big loss. Okay, what's the fourth and final clue?
The fourth clue is pretty straightforward. It's just looking at what happened last year, 2024, during this exact same period.
And we already touched on this when we talked about the forecast.
Exactly. Last year showed precisely the pattern we seem to be starting this year. Relatively stable, flat prices through May and early June.
Followed by
that very distinct, sharp price spike specifically for the 4th of July holiday week.
Okay, let me try and synthesize this. It feels like we have the current forecast and last year's actual data, both screaming big price spike coming for July 4th.
Right. Strong signals there.
BUT.
Yeah.
We also have longer-term historical data saying that for this specific time of year, booking closer to the date usually results in lower prices than booking far ahead.
Correct.
And even the more recent data, while showing smaller savings around holidays, still generally shows waiting doesn't massively penalize you, usually. It's a real clash of indicators, isn't it?
That's the perfect way to put it, a clash. The forecast looks bad if you wait, but the typical historical behavior for this window suggests waiting is often better. It's a tough call.
And we actually saw evidence supporting that waiting can pay off idea in the data for this week's rentals, the one starting June 2nd, right?
Yes, absolutely. The source gave a specific example for an economy car rented at OGG Airport starting June 2nd.
What was the difference?
If you booked that car 5 weeks prior, the price was $274 for the week. But if you waited and booked it last minute, like on June 1st for the next day,
It was cheaper.
yep, $236 a week.
So waiting 5 weeks saved $38, or about 14%. Not insignificant.
Exactly. And off-airport prices for this week showed a similar downward trend overall compared to booking 5 weeks ago. The last-minute price was about 7% lower.
Okay.
And interestingly, the analysis also found that specifically for off-airport rentals this week, there seemed to be a real sweet spot if you booked about 3 weeks in advance. That offered potential savings up to 40% compared to booking further out.
40%, wow.
Yeah, but they didn't find a similar distinct sweet spot for the airport rentals this week, just that general downward trend towards last minute.
Okay, so for rentals starting right now, waiting clearly worked out, especially if you hit that 3-week window for off-airport.
The data for June 2nd certainly supports that conclusion, yes.
All right, so let's try and pull this all together for you, the listener. We've definitely seen that Maui car rental prices are on the rise as we head into summer. No question there.
Definitely trending up.
And we've seen some really dramatic, sudden jumps for certain popular categories, like minivans practically tripling in price over the last month.
Yeah, those specific categories are really moving.
And looking ahead, the forecast, which is also backed up by what happened last year, strongly points towards a significant price spike coming specifically for the July 4th holiday week.
That prediction is hard to ignore, definitely a major factor to consider.
BUT. And it's a big but. We also dug into historical data and even recent trends to some extent, which suggest that for this particular time of year, waiting until closer to your travel date has often, historically, resulted in lower prices.
Even if, more recently around holidays, those potential savings from waiting might have shrunk a bit compared to the long-term average, still, waiting hasn't typically led to paying more for this period.
Right, so now you have these different pieces of the puzzle.
Hmm.
All this data and perspective comes from the source material, the blog of Frank's Friendly Cars, Maui Car Rental. They're an independent company tracking prices from lots of providers.
It gives you a good basis for making your own call.
Exactly. You've got that stark forecast of a holiday spike pulling you one way.
And then you've got the historical tendency, even recent examples of last-minute savings pulling you the other way.
Which leads us to the final thought for you to wrestle with. Given this specific situation, the strong prediction of a sharp July 4th price spike, but also the historical evidence suggesting last-minute deals are pretty common for this time of year. How do you make that call?
Yeah, how do you weigh it up? Is the peace of mind you get from booking ahead worth potentially missing out on a last-minute saving? Or is the chance of saving some money worth the risk of waiting, knowing that spike is predicted?